What's going on, everyone? My name is Derek. Welcome to my channel, Euro Superbike Life, or ESBKLife for short. In this recent or latest installment of my wrecked bike rebuild video series, sponsored by Bellissimo Moto, where I take a wrecked MV Agusta F4RR that has been down a few times and we turn it into one badass street bike. It is, again, sponsored by Bellissimo Moto. Check out the URL right here. If you have a European sport bike or European bike in general, they have all of your parts and accessories to make it go faster, look better, sound better. You name it, they have parts for it. They are in Las Vegas. Again, check out the URL or give Randy and Lyle a call. Stop in if you're in the area. They always have something going on in the shop, whether they're building something special or sales on parts or what have you. BellissimoMoto.com. Guys are fantastic. They'll take care of you. Trust me. On this episode, we are going to be doing a couple of things. I might break it into two episodes. We'll have to see how it goes. But we are going to be installing my MV Corse Race ECU along with my Rapid Bike race fuel and ignition control module. Then we're going to be, we're going to be syncing the throttle bodies, and I think that's about it. Like I said, I may break that up into two episodes or not. Either way, we are getting to the end of the wrecked bike rebuild video series. I think there'll be one, maybe two videos left, and then we'll call this done for the series. To be perfectly honest with you, when you're customizing bikes, cars, trucks, what have you, you're never really done, are you? And I'm not really going to be done. There's a bunch of other things that I still want to do to this bike, but they'll happen over a length of time. I'm not sure whenever I get around to doing it or getting money or what have you. But for this video series, we are just about done. The bike is running awesome. It wasn't. I'll talk about that when we get back from my intro. Welcome back, guys. So here are the things that we're going to be doing today. So over here I have my MV Corse Race ECU and my Rapid Bike race unit, not the Evo, along with said wiring harness. And it's really simple to do these things. But before we start tearing into the bike, I want to tell you a little bit about where I am and then what led up to this, because it's been a few weeks. So I'm in New England. I'm at my brother's place again for the summer this time. So last year, if you recall, I came out here for a few weeks, brought all of my bikes. But this time I brought two bikes. I bought my track BMW S1000RR and then the wrecked bike rebuild. I left the Aprilia and the track F4 at home. And I'm out here for the summer. I'll probably head back home late August. But right before I came out here, and I've been out here about 3 weeks now, right before I came out here, I got the bike back from paint. So it was maybe 4 or 5 days before we loaded up everything and hit the road. And I got the bike back from paint. We threw the remaining pieces on it, and I went for a test ride, and the bike rode like absolute crap, below 4,500 RPMs. Technically, it rode horrible above 4,500 RPMs as well, but wasn't really noticeable. There was more noticeable below 4,500 RPMs. And I couldn't figure out what was going on. You know, having a track bike, I was able to swap parts from that bike onto this bike. But, you know, I swapped tank, which eliminated things like the fuel pump, fuel filter, fuel pressure regulator, bad fuel. I swapped over the injectors and the injector rail, so that eliminated that. I checked coils, I replaced spark plugs, and like yada, yada, yada. Regardless, the bike was still running bad. I got around to testing the coils. I tested the resistance, primary and secondary, only to learn that there's really no secondary resistance on these coils, at least I was told anyway. But I don't have the specs for those. So out of the 4 coils, one was reading different, the number 2 coil. So I replaced that one, took it off my track bike and replaced it, and it ran a little bit better. But it was still running crappy. But then I ran out of time. So I loaded everything up, brought it here. And I've been working with a master tech here, as well as the mvagusta.net forum. So if you're a forum member there and you're following this particular post I had on there, then you know what I did to fix the bike. But just to show you how small the world is, the individual that built my track F4 is actually the master tech that's helping me, or was helping me, try to figure out what's going on with this bike here, along with a lot of forum members. So again, I replaced the O2 sensor. I checked a number of other sensors and relays. Everything was checking out. I wasn't getting any errors on the dash. And while I didn't have any software diagnostic software, can't speak, at the time, I couldn't check to see if there were any errors on the ECU. I also checked ECU. So I have my race ECU, obviously there's the stock ECU in there, and my track ECU. They're all Magneti Marelli ECU, so I could swap one out, and it all didn't make any difference. It all ran the same. So I got back here, and after a few days of messing with a number of things, checking a number of things, I decided to go ahead and just replace all the coils. Now, if you order coils from your local MV dealer, expect to pay about $200 a piece. There are 4 of them, so $800 for a set of coils. I didn't do that. I did find some aftermarket ones. Technically they're not aftermarkets, they're all Buru, but they didn't come from the dealer. And I found them for about $70 to $75 a piece, but they all had to come from overseas. So I didn't want to wait for those either. So luckily for me, my son was paying attention while we were in the garage, and I called him up and asked him to remove the coils from the bike that was now 3,000 miles away and ship them to me. He was able to do that, so awesome. So all 4 coils showed up here, terrific. I was ready to replace all of them, only to find out that he broke one while removing it. So I was able to ultimately replace 3 of the 4 coils, and now the bike is running absolutely fantastic. So now it's time to throw in the Go Fast goodies, and then later on, I think next Friday, I have an appointment scheduled with Seacoast Motorcycles. They're here local in Derry, New Hampshire, and they're going to tune it with the Rapid bike for me. So right now we have to throw all this stuff in here. We have to sync the throttle bodies. Now technically, I've already done that. I'd synced the throttle bodies like 2 days ago, but I just wanted to get that on film and record it for you guys. I guess it's not film anymore. I don't know what. I want to get it recorded for you guys and get that posted on YouTube, just in case any of you guys are thinking about or wanting to or needing to sync your throttle bodies. Really easy process. You just need the right tools, and I want to get that on camera for you. So I've actually gone ahead and messed up the sync on the number 1 and 4 cylinders, just so I could have something to sync for this video. So enough talk. Let me change things around, and we'll go and start tearing up the bike and start getting things going. Okay, so the first thing we need to do is we simply need to take off the seat and all the fairings and everything in order to get the tank and so forth out of the way. So I'm just going to speed up through this. Okay, so with the all the fairings and the tank removed and the airbox cover removed, now we can remove the airbox lower portion here. Okay, so here's the vacuum line connection we were talking about, so that just pulls off. And then there's a fuel connection here. So normally I can't get my fingers in there, so what I like to do is use something with a poker, and I push that in and squeeze the other, and then I can pry up on it. and then it pops out like so. There are a couple of clips on the side, and then there's an electrical connection for your upper injectors. So we can just pop these off the side real quick. Like that. One like that. Okay. And then there's an electrical connector here, right here, white, 6-prong, that we need to disconnect for the upper injectors. Okay, that's done. So these air intake runners have to come off, and then air intake runner covers and then air intake runners. So I probably should have taken off all of the fairings because putting those back on is just not going to happen. So let me pause the camera. I'll take the front of the bike off and then we can get back to this. Okay, sorry about that. Now, as you can see with the front of the bike and the air intake runners off, we're now all ready to remove the lower half of the air box, which includes the upper injectors and your velocity stack. So all we do, again, just need to pull up gently. You don't want to do it fast. Just pull up gently. And now we have to feed the rubber vacuum line out through the bottom. Like so. And then we can just remove this entire unit. Once I disconnect the zip ties. There we go. All right, there we go. I can set this aside. All right, so with everything out of the way, we have clear access to our ECU here. Here are our throttle bodies, our secondary intake system. This really just pumps air into the exhaust so that you have a better fuel burn or emissions related burn, so you're not sending pollutions into the air as much. If you're a track bike, you could probably take all this stuff off and block it in. We have our 4 coils, and again, I mentioned I replaced 3 of these coils. So I replaced 1, 2, and 4. 3 is a leftover. The bike is running fantastic now. We have our throttle position sensor here in the middle. We are going to tie our rapid bike harness into here with this green and white wire, and you can see it's already been uncovered. And if you look closely, you can see that there have been connections already made, because like I said, I've already had the harness in and out of here a couple of times. So what we want to do is we want to remove this ECU and replace it. It's pretty simple. We got a couple of bolts here on the top. You really don't need to remove those to get the ECU out. We just really need to remove this rubber strapping, which just pops off. And then there are 2 connectors. So with the Magneti Marelli ECU, there's a connector on the bottom over on this side and one over on this side. And basically those slides just slide this way and slide this way. So they slide out. And then the ECU is free. And all we need to do is pop the ECU free from the bracket that's holding it. So this is the bracket that's bolted in here at the top. It's up to you how you want to do it. You don't need to remove the bracket, I guess is what I'm saying. So I'm not going to remove the bracket. I'm just going to grab a flathead screwdriver. And I'm going to slide the connector out that way. I'm going to slide the connector out that way. And now I can just pry this out of the bracket, and out it comes. Okay, so with the tank removed and our ECU removed, you can see our connectors here. We have our larger connector on this side and the smaller one, and these are our 2 pieces. Excuse me. These are 2 distinct pieces. They're not connected whatsoever. And you can see our connections for our coils connected to the back of the bracket here. So if we remove this bracket, these connections would come down. So your coils run under your throttle bodies, and down under here, and they connect to your harness, main wiring harness here, and you just sort of push in this tab and slide this down to get those off of the bracket. Over here we have a solenoid. It's a vacuum solenoid. Over here we have our tilt sensor. So in the 2013 and newer bikes, they have what's called a lean angle sensor, and that's mounted up here under the headlight and the dash. The older bikes have what's called a tilt sensor, and this is connected to the bracket again. And this tells your bike if it's leaned over. I think it's past 65 or 60 or 65 degrees. If you're lean beyond that, it assumes that the bike has fallen over, and this unit will actually shut the bike off. It'll cut electrical power to the bike and shut everything off, so it's not just running with it flopped over on its side. You can see we have our 4 lower injectors and our throttle bodies and so forth. So now what we need to do is we need to put our harness or install our harness within our bike. The nice thing about the harness, I'll put this back on the stand here in a minute, but the nice thing about the harness is all the connections are labeled. So we got supply there, we got auxiliary in, this is where the rapid bike connects to, we got our CAN bus connection. Down here we have our fuel injectors. You can see that it's even labeled. That says fuel injector 4. That one says 3, so forth and so on. Over here we have our crank angle sensor, and then down there we have our connectors for our for our O2 sensor. So everything is labeled really clearly, and it's super easy to install. So let me put this back on the tripod and we'll get going. Okay, so what we need to do before we do anything is disconnect the battery, because we're going to be messing with some electrical items and we don't want to short anything out. All right, so now what we need to do is just find the appropriate routing for the bike, or for the rapid bike. I know that this rapid bike unit sits nicely right up in here, so that's where I'm going to install that. So basically I just want to run the wires. We have a ground wire here, so we want to make sure that's in the area of the battery. Okay. This is going to come over here. Our CAN bus connections. Okay, so here's our O2 connector, and what I like to do is I like to run it down through here. It's awful tight in this area, so it can be a pain in the ass. So just FYI. All right, I got a zip tie here on my O2 sensor that I'm going to remove. So this just slides off that bracket, and it's pretty simple. There's a male and a female for your stock O2 wiring, and there's a male and female for the harness. You can't mix them up, so you just plug them in appropriately like this. You can slide this one back onto the bracket, either one actually. Okay, next we have our 12-volt supply here, and the connector for that is right here. Kind of hard to see on camera, but we simply disconnect those, and same as a male and a female. Two prongs, or not two prongs, but two connectors, a male and a female on your harness, and a male and a female on your stock bike. You just plug them in line. Like so. Next, we have our crank angle sensor. Again, a male and a female from your rapid bike harness. Your crank angle sensor is right here, down in this corner. So to release it, you just push down on the spring, it pops out, and you have a male and a female. Again, kind of hard to mess up. Plug one into there, and the other end over here. Now we have our upper injector connectors. So if you remember, we moved the lower air box. We removed the upper connectors from right here. So it's already disconnected. So we'll plug this end into it, and then when we go to plug in the lower air box, we'll plug that end into it. So we can just plug this right into here. And like I said, when we go to install the lower air box with the lower injectors on it, for the upper injectors, we'll just plug it into here. Now we simply have our throttle position connector. We have our throttle position connector here, and our injector connector. So again, these are all labeled. So I have the number 1 injector here. Number 1 is here. We should go 1, 2, 3, 4. So we just install them across appropriately. So to do that, we have 1, 2, 3, and 4. And I apparently love zip ties. So we disconnect one, and it's nice because, let me back up here. MV actually labels all of these. So if you're a mechanic, you're a technician, or you haven't pulled these off, they'll all be labeled. So we have number 1 here. There's number 2 that's labeled, and so forth and so on. So it's hard to mess up. So again, we find number 1 from our rapid bike harness, number 1 here. Can't mix them up. You plug one into here and plug the other end onto the injector. Then we do the same thing with number 2. Disconnect number 2. Here's the number 2 injector. Plug that into there, and then this onto the number 2. We have number 3 over here. So we find number 3 in the harness. Here we go, number 3. Plug that into there. And that into there. That's okay. You're good. I won't get you on camera.
It's all right. Maybe I need to make my YouTube.
And then we have number 4. Number 4 is being a little bit of a... So you have the number 4 connector here. Okay, so all our injectors are connected. We'll reroute these things so that makes, obviously it won't stay like this. But now we have our connector for our throttle position sensor. I'll wait for my nephew to pull out. Okay, so like I was saying, this is our TPS, our throttle position sensor connector. I've already gone ahead and installed from the last time I had this installed and put a splice into here. And on this particular bike, the lead that we want is this green and white wire, white and green wire. You just need to find the proper routing for this. So what I like to do, we have our fuel rail here and our throttle bodies in the middle with the throttle body sensor here. What I like to do is come up under here Have that come up under there like so. And then this will just come across top and the air box will sit right in here. And this won't interfere when we twist our throttle. We won't have any interference with the butterfly valves or anything in the opening mechanisms for our throttle body. So then we simply feed this into here appropriately. We'll pinch down. Like so. And now our harness is installed. So what I'll do now is I'll just go and clean this up. I'll zip tie it where I want it to be. And then we'll get back to installing our ECU. Sorry guys, my camera died on me. I don't know why. Sony a6000, I really need to upgrade, but it's just installed in reverse order for the ECU as well as the upper and lower airbox covers. So right now what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the screws back in the upper airbox cover, install the battery, and then we'll be ready to sync our throttle bodies. All right, guys, so my battery's installed. I just installed my Rapid Bike race unit. ECU is installed. So now what we need to do is we need to sync the throttle bodies. In order to do that, you're going to need two tools. You're going to need something like this. You can also use regular vacuum gauges. You'll need 4 of them, but this is a sync tool made by Motion Pro. It's called Sync Pro. Several years ago when you could still use mercury, these would be filled with mercury, and you hook up hoses up here to your vacuum lines, start the bike, and then you'll turn the air screws. You'll need access to each of the air screws on your throttle bodies. So 1 and 4 are really easy to access. They're on the outside, but 2 and 3 are in the middle. And your tank needs to be connected to your bike. And that's hard to do when the tank is sitting in the center here. So let me put this to the side. So the tool that we need for that is this. This is my tank bracket. It is based on the MV Agusta OEM bracket. I think MV wants about 400 US for this bracket, so I decided to make my own along with the help of my brother. So basically what we have here is some hardwood. I believe this is about 1/2 inch or 3/4 inch hardwood. This is oak. You won't want to use anything like particle board or anything like that. It needs to be hard. 14 inches by 5 inches. We have a bracket here from a spare seat that will mount into here. We have some dowels, 2 dowels here on either side that will mount into the front mounting area where the back of the where your back of your fuel tank bracket normally goes. Then we have this is a 5/8 piece of threaded, coarse threaded rod, along with 4 screws. So 1 on the bottom along with the washer, 1 on top along with the washer, and then 2 up here to hold the tank. And then this is just some angle iron with some self-adhesive felt on the back. I think this cost me $29 to make. And the reason it cost $29 to make is because the dowels and the rod I bought extra because I wasn't sure how much I was going to need. Figured I'd cut it a couple of times. If I bought the correct size to begin with, I think I could have built this for maybe $10 to $15 total. But it's really simple to use. You just line the dowels up in the front here, push it on the back. Got to make sure it's locked in there. Take the screw off the top. And then what we can do is we can sit the tank on here, but still have access to all of our throttle body air adjustments on this. It's pretty awesome. The other option is to have a friend who can hold the tank up for you for about 15 minutes. I don't know if anybody has ever tried to hold 5 gallons of fuel up above their waist for 5 minutes. It's not fun, trust me. All right, so here's my tank. And what we're going to do is we're going to set that in there right like that. Put the nut on the top. It doesn't need to be tight. And as you can see, that's locked in. It's not going anywhere. We can make our electrical connection like so. And then we can make our fuel connection like so. End of story. How awesome is that? Now I have access to all of the, everything I need to under here and still have the bike run. So it's really, really cool. I'm so glad that we built this because I tend to work a lot by myself, and this is a lifesaver. I wouldn't be able to do this or sync these throttle bodies by myself without this tool. And I'll be damned if I'm going to pay MV Augusta $400 for their specialty tool. So, okay, so now let me adjust the camera, and then we will get to syncing our throttle bodies. Okay, guys, so here we are. I have my sync tool. I have my vacuum lines down here. So what we want to do is first we have to calibrate this tool. So what I'm going to do first, take this off. It's important that you leave this vertical. If you don't leave it vertical, you'll have a lot to do down there to get all the fluid on the bottom. So I'm going to take these caps off. Like so. Then I have 4 long hoses, and each hose has a restrictor in it. I wish I could show you that, but I can't at the moment. So you want to grab the end without the restrictor. I can feel it here. It's a little nub. So this end, I'm just going to feed one on each of these rods. There's a restrictor there, so grab this one. And at the moment, it doesn't make any difference which hose goes on which scale as long as the restrictor is not at the top. And you have to calibrate this tool each time you use it to make sure that you get accurate readings, but it's really simple to use. Okay, so there we go. So I got one vacuum hose for each one of my scales down there. And you notice the scales, they don't have any number values on the measurements because the number values aren't important. What's important is that we get all 4 of these chambers, one for each of your throttle bodies, to be the same level, then they're synced. But again, we have to, as you can see, each of these lines are at different heights right now. So we have to calibrate this so that we can make sure that we sync properly here. So the way to do this, and you can use any one of these throttle bodies for the calibration, but the tool comes with a little, they call it a manifold, and a short stubby hose. So what we want to do is we want to grab one of our caps here that we just yanked off. We're going to put it on the end. I'm going to grab our shorty hose, excuse me, and put it on the other end like this. And now there are 4 prongs, you notice, one for each of the hoses down here. And again, it doesn't make, at this point, it doesn't make any difference which hose we connect to which one of these ports here, as long as they're all connected. There we go. And now we want to connect this stubby hose directly to one of our throttle bodies. Now, how we're going to sync this, we're going to use these ports here. There are 2 ports on either side. These 2 over here represent throttle body 1, throttle body 2, and the other side is 3 and 4. And this is how we're going to sync, but we need to connect this directly to a single throttle body. And we're going to do that with this one right here because it's the easiest to get to. So we're just going to pull off this vacuum line here for the number 1 throttle body. Then we're going to connect this here. Just push that on there. Get on there. Ow, crap. And my phone goes off. All right. let me bring you in here and show you that. Okay, so here's our manifold with the shorty hose that runs up, and right in here is where we are connected to, right in here is where we're connected to the #1 throttle body, this guy here. And here is the air adjustment. Jesus, sorry about that. So this is the #1 throttle body. This is the air adjustment for #1. And then we're connected this vent hose right here, this shorty one, right to here, right under there. It's kind of hard to see because it's still dark, but now we're connected. So what we can do now is we can start the bike, let it warm up a little bit, and then we'll adjust each of the 4 chambers with a screwdriver based on here. And then once it's level, we're good. And then we can disconnect this manifold here and then connect directly to these ports and then the ones on the other side. Okay guys, so I am back. I've let the bike warm up. It's nice and warm, not overly warm. And I'm going to tell you what's going to happen here, because once I start the bike, you're probably not going to be able to hear me talk. When I start the bike, all 4 of these chambers will be uneven, and the goal is to make them even. And because we're hooked to only the very first throttle body #1, we can sync all of these based on throttle body #1 and then go about syncing all of them. So I'm going to start the bike. I'm going to see all of these lines at different heights, and then I'm going to grab the screwdriver here, and I'm going to turn these until they're all in sync. And then we'll be the scale, the tool here will be calibrated, and then we can go about syncing the rest of the throttle bodies. Okay, so now that the tool is calibrated, I can remove this from here, pull that off, and we need to put careful, engine is hot. We need to put our vacuum hose back on there. Now what we do, we can remove our manifold here. Now what we do is we can remove the ports here and on the other side, so we can just pull these off. So it's going to be throttle body 1, throttle body 2, so you want to line those up with the chambers. So column 1 here, I'm going to say is throttle body 1, and we just push this vacuum line onto there. Column number 2 is for throttle body number 2. Then I'll grab these 2 lines, bring them over to the other side. This one is 3. And this one is 4. All right. So again, I'm going to start the bike, and what you're going to see is these lines will be at different heights. And what you want to do is first, the manual says that before you start this process, for each of the air screws across each throttle body, you should close them all out So let's turn them all the way clockwise. This one's all the way in. And then turn them out 1.5 turns, each and every one of them. So if I do this, I go, that's a half, that's 1, that's a half. So that one's out 1.5. And I'll do the same thing on the others. So I'll close out number 4, and then I'll go a half, 1.5. And now I'll get to number 3 if I could see it. There we go for number 2. So we close that out. So half, 1, half. And then number 3. There we go. Turn that all the way in. So half, 1, half. All right. So now each one is 1.5 turns out from fully closed. So what we'll do is we'll start the bike. You'll see that these are all different levels. And then what we do is we turn each one based on the highest one, whether it's 1, 2, 3, or 4, doesn't make any difference. We'll sync them to the highest one. And the manual says that you shouldn't go from max turned out is 3.5 turns. So from fully closed, the max you should adjust each of these throttle bodies is 3.5 turns. If you have to do more than 3.5 turns, you have another problem. So I'm going to start the bike, and then I'm going to start the sync process. So actually, we're not that bad. That is the throttle body sync process. Now, the one thing you don't want to do while you have your scale attached is to twist the throttle and rev the engine. What will happen is you'll suck fluid up through these vents and shoot it out your exhaust, and then you'll need to contact Motion Pro to get some more fluid. It's not mercury, but I don't think you want to ingest this and touch it or anything like that. So it's in the manual, so read the manual. But that's it. Now we can disconnect all of these. and put our tool away. Well, all right, guys, I think that's a wrap for this episode of my Wreck Bike Rebuild video series sponsored by Bellisi Moto. We got the Rapid Bike harness installed. We got the Rapid Bike race unit installed. We got our race ECU installed. So now and I almost forgot, we got our throttle bodies all synced. So now I just need to put all the fairings and everything back on it, and it'll be ready to go. In our next episode, which may be our last for this Wreck Bike Rebuild video series, this bike will be in Derry, New Hampshire at Seacoast Motorcycles, where it will be getting dyno tuned. Charles and the guys up there are going to dyno tune this for me and dial it in. You don't necessarily need to dyno tune with the Rapid Bike unit. With the Rapid Bike unit, it has a built-in self-adaptive feature. Unlike some of the others where you have to buy a secondary module, this one has it built in. So the more you ride it, the more it'll fine-tune your fuel tables. Now, I don't believe it does anything for ignition, but it will fine-tune the fuel table. So the more you ride it, the more it syncs to how you ride the bike, and it'll apply fuel adjustments so that you get the best out of the bike. Now, if we put it on the dyno, we can turn that feature off, and if my tuner has an awesome map, I'll turn it off, and we'll just leave it alone, and that's the way it'll be. But we'll see how it goes. But I'm Derek. Again, this is your Superbike Life. You guys know the drill. Like, comment, subscribe, or smash it if you didn't. Until next time, guys, take care.